Once upon a time, there was a man named Emeka. Emeka's wife's name was Nkechi. Emeka and Nkechi had been married for years and lived together as husband and wife. Their home was filled with laughter, joy, and good living. But despite all this, Emeka was not a happy man. He was deeply pained and was daily growing resentment towards his wife for giving him only female children. Emeka, a man of considerable standing in the village, felt continuously inadequate because he did not have any male child. Even though he has been married and has 3 children, none of them is a male, and that troubled him every day, day and night. One day, Emeka was outside at the bar in his village, having drinks in the evening. As they were drinking with his kinsmen, one of his kinsmen, Okoro, raised the issue of the next village election, which was due to come up in the next few months. Emeka, out of exuberance, indicated interest in vying for the position. However, Okoro immediately asked Emeka to shut up and sit down, as the position was only available and open to men who are real men. He taunted Emeka and abused him for not having a male child, calling him a woman and all sorts of names for his inability to give birth to a male child. That night, Emeka came back home and was deeply troubled and sorrowed in his soul. He refused to speak to anyone and did not even respond to the wife's greetings. Nkechi, sensing that something was troubling her dear husband, decided to do whatever that was within her power to make sure that he is appeased and happy. Nkechi became worried and did all her best to ensure that Emeka was well cared for. She went to the kitchen herself, despite being heavily pregnant, and prepared Emeka's favorite soup of egusi soup with grass cutter. Well, after everything, Emeka refused to eat the food and ignored every effort and attempts made by Nkechi to comfort him. That night, Nkechi, having done everything she could have done, decided to take care of her children. She ate with them and sang Igwonwa and Ogele song to them until they slept off. However, deeply in her heart, she was not settled, but she masked her feelings and went to bed with pain and agony, not knowing what exactly was wrong with her husband. She only hoped that her husband would be fine in the morning and at least ready to talk about the issue. In Emeka's community, it is a thing of pride for every man to have a male child. Sons are seen as warriors, and it is a taboo to have only female children. In fact, it is better to have no child at all than to have only female children. Sons were cherished as bearers of the family's name and inheritors of wealth and status. Each time Nkechi gave birth to a female child, Emeka's frustration deepened, poisoning his love for his wife and overshadowing the blessings that the birth of his children brought to their family. Well, now, Nkechi is pregnant again for the 4th child, and everyone is hoping in anticipation that the child would be a male. As the time for birth got closer, Nkechi was also preparing, hoping that she should give birth to a male child as to remove the shame that the female children had brought upon her life. When the time came, Nkechi labored in the village hospital. But while she was in labor, Emeka paced outside, his heart a tumult of hope and dread. Emeka refused to come inside the hospital, but he stood by the gate hoping to hear good news from people rejoicing from the hospital. Emeka waited in vain as he only saw people coming out of the hospital with sad faces, signifying that it was another female child. Emeka was angry, and without a word to Nkechi or a glance at the newborn daughter, he stormed out of the hospital, leaving his wife and children in a bewildering mix of pain and sense of abandonment. Nkechi's heart broke deeply, not just for herself, but for her daughters, who were innocent in their father's eyes. Yet, he deemed it insufficient to give them the little attention that they desired. She struggled to understand how the man she so much loved for many years, who had once looked upon their family with pride, could turn away so coldly. Despite the hurt though, Nkechi's resolve hardened. She would not let the situation to define her or her daughters' lives. Nkechi was left in the hospital and did not even have the money to pay the hospital bill, as Emeka had abandoned her with no money. The hospital bill was eventually paid by a philanthropist who came into the hospital for a meeting and saw Nkechi's plight, felt pity for her and her children, and decided to offset the bill. Weeks turned into months, and Emeka's absence became a silent spectre over their lives. Rumors were everywhere throughout the village like harmattan dust. Speaking of Emeka's new wife, Adanna, the rumor reached Nkechi of Adanna's hatred for her and her children, and of how Emeka has fallen in love with this strange woman whose quest for money and fame has no end. The community was divided in their reactions. Some felt very bad that Emeka had to abandon his family for another woman because of her inability to give birth to a male child at the moment. Others felt that it was Emeka's right to choose how many wives he wants to marry and also how many children he wants to have, including his right to have a male child. In the midst of all these problems, Nkechi found strength in the solidarity that her fellow women provided. They rallied around her, especially the young ones, offering support to help her and fill the gap that Emeka's absence had created in their lives. Nkechi in turn also threw herself into her children's upbringing. She made up her mind from that very day that she would do whatever it takes to make sure that her children get the best and that they emerge among the best both in character and abilities within the society. As the seasons changed, so did all the events and perception in the village. Emeka became the talk of the town. Emeka's new life with Adanna was far from the bliss he had thought it would be. Unlike before, when Emeka was in control of his household with his first wife, he had everything he wanted at his beckoning. Emeka is now a shadow of himself. Adanna's hatred for Emeka's first family was easily seen and can be smelt everywhere. She viewed Nkechi and her daughters as threats to her newly acquired status and did everything in her power to ensure that they were ostracized from the community. She pushed Emeka severally to lay accusation against Nkechi so that she can be summoned at the village chief palace. But Emeka, even though he has become a shadow of himself with many questionable character, he at this moment did not oblige her. He still showed some sign of resilience and refused to do the bidding of the new wife, Adanna. Meanwhile, Nkechi's resilience and grace with which she handled her circumstances with the children shifted the attention and perception of the villagers, that they started showing much more compassion towards her. She on her own started a petty trading at the village market and used all her earnings to ensure that she trained her children at home and in school. She single-handedly ensured that her children were different from other children in that village. Her daughters each excelled and became excellent in the field that they have chosen. The eldest daughter, Amara, showed a keen interest in agriculture. She provided different innovation in farming techniques that yielded bountiful harvests of farm produce, including yam, cassava, maize, tomatoes, to mention but a few. Chioma, the second daughter, also on her own part displayed a talent for fabric processing, capturing the hearts of young and old women with the current trends in fashion. And the little Ada, also on her own part, even though she was still a little child, she was known to have good character that made her got endeared to all in the village. As the village began to recognize the value of Nkechi and her daughters, Emeka's reputation suffered greatly. His once respected name became synonymous to betrayal and short-sightedness. The community also changed their attitude towards Emeka gradually. They no longer respected Emeka as they did in the past. It was shocking to Emeka, but he was still very adamant and still refused to accept it. In his quest for a male child, Emeka decided to lose everything that truly mattered to him. As the days went by and many years passed, there were a severe drought in the land. The drought threatened the village's livelihood. The farmers' lands were desolated, crops withered, and there was famine in the land. Hunger was looming. The village turned to the oracles for help, but the oracle asked them to look inward for solutions. Well, nothing at all seemed to be working. The news of Amara's innovation got to the king, and he summoned Amara to the palace and asked her for help in finding a way out of the situation. The king told Amara, "We know our community stand on women and their position in the society. However, we have a great situation at hand, and I heard that you are the only person that has the capacity to take us out of this quagmire." For a moment, Amara pondered over all the mistreatment that she had suffered and how the king condoled all of them by keeping silent. But she decided to put all of them behind her and told the king that she would do her best in supporting the village. She said, "My king, may you live forever. I have paid attention to your words, my lord. I have heard the wisdom that came out of your mouth. This is our ancestral land, and I will do my best to support you, my king, and the poor and innocent people of my village to overcome this problem." The king was surprised at her boldness. Her choice of word also baffled him, and the wisdom that she displayed was matchless. The king, though, did not say anything to her, but he kept his remarks in his heart. Amara, without any reservation, swerved into action and gave her all. She supported and trained the villagers on the new farming techniques. She introduced them to improve farm seedlings, irrigation, and other techniques that would help the village to grow their farm and overcome the famine and hunger. Amara's innovation in farming techniques became the community's lifeline, providing sustenance and hope in this time of despair. Emeka, on his own part, watched from a far distance, seeing a female child that he had rejected being the savior of the village at moments like this. In his mind, he had a mixture of pride and regret for the bad that he did to his own children. But even at this moment, pride could not let him approach her to ask for forgiveness and congratulate her. He saw for the first time the true value of his daughters and the grave mistake he had made in abandoning them. As days went by, Emeka was convinced that he was wrong, and at last he mustered up the courage to approach his first wife and her children to beg them for forgiveness. Approaching Nkechi's home for the first time since he had abandoned them, Emeka was nervous and he maintained caution in case someone attacks him in revenge for his action. He sensed that there could be possible dangers or problems on his way, given that he abandoned Nkechi and her children for a very long time. Nkechi, as usual, always being the embodiment of grace, allowed him to speak and pour out his heart, explain the emotions that he had, the reasons why he abandoned them, tender his apologies, and also express his regrets. It was a conversation that was filled with pain, with Emeka acknowledging the hurt he had caused the family, and also he congratulated Nkechi so much for the strength that she showed in his absence. Nkechi, after listening to Emeka and considering all parts, decided to forgive him. She cried and asked Emeka to go and apologize to the children who had grown and learned to do a lot of things on their own without the presence of their father in their life. Emeka, recognizing the depth of his folly, agreed and begged his children to forgive him for his stupidity. He promised to make amends and make up for all the times they had lost. Adanna, realizing her influence over Emeka was waning, she embarked on another campaign to discredit Nkechi and her daughters. She spread malicious rumors everywhere, attempting to sow another seed of discord and prevent Emeka's reconciliation with his first family. However, the community this time around became wiser, having seen the innovation of Nkechi and her children, could not agree more. In fact, Adanna felt isolated this time around, and she was shunned by the community, and her actions were reported to the king in palace. Well, the king got angry over Adanna's obscene behavior, and a meeting was summoned, and Adanna was tried summarily in that meeting and was banished from the village. Emeka now went back to his family, but living with serious guilt over the evil that he committed by abandoning his children. Will Emeka ever get out of the guilt over abandoning his family and going after another woman? Only time will tell.